The CSA is at its most basic level is really pretty simple. This is the first page. The second page. The third page. What does that look a lot like? Your posters, right? Except these are all in alphabetical order. So look at the instructions there. In each of the large boxes below, bullet point characteristics of each time period. Be as specific as possible. This is you downloading your brain first thing when you sit down with this CSA, with this final, right? Everything you can remember about each one of these. Then the next page says arrange the time periods in order of causation using arrows to connect. It is possible to have one time period influencing more than one other time period. Start with the first time period in the upper left corner and progress in any logical order using numbers to make your order clear. Clear enough so far?
So do we just write the Crusades like that and like?
If come finals day you believe Crusades is the first one,
yeah.
then yes,
Okay.
you would. These will not be up here.
Oh God.
Okay. And then this is the prompt. Based upon your work during the earlier steps of this assessment, you should now be able to write several paragraphs clearly explaining the relationships between the time periods. Follow a generally chronological order. So when I sit down to grade these, I am going to start grading with the essay. I will only go back to these other pages if you haven't earned your points out of the essay. Okay? The whole point, remember, CSAs are for all levels of students, right? So what am I expecting from you, my honors students?
Goodish.
Great essays.
Goodish.
I don't expect to have to go back to these. Now, if I were sitting down grading a co-taught class's essays, I'm expecting I'll probably have to go back to this, that maybe they got it in order on that page, but they didn't write about it in order, or they had some facts that they didn't actually get included in their essay. Okay? You have an hour and a half to do this. That is ample time. Okay? The things that are up on these posters are suggestions, ideas of things you might include on these organizational pages. Will you use all of those? Good gracious, no. Good gracious, no. When you are writing in the essay, how many things about a time period do you think you should probably talk about? 3, maybe 4, depending upon how in-depth some of them are. Should those things be related to one another within the time period? Yeah. Should they have something to do with what you're going to talk about in the next time period? Ideally, yes. Otherwise, you're just writing 9 separate paragraphs. So, should you spend some time thinking about this and mapping it out between now and the final? Yeah. Or you're going to write an incoherent piece of make me hate you as I'm grading on Christmas afternoon. Okay. Our grades are due the 27th.
But that's so
Well,
That's like
procrastinating.
We do our Christmas on Christmas Eve. So,
what?
okay.
Not Christmas morning and then have.
Never have. We never have Christmas Eve.
Christmas
Christmas morning was when the extended family came over, but they've all moved away.
Oh.
So,
I'm just kidding.
I'm a grown up. All right.
So that's what made me confused.
So, the big question is, how do we put this all together? Well, I'm going to go with my gut and say Kay was probably correct that we should start with the Crusades. Okay. So if we start with the Crusades, that was miserable. Let's start with the Crusades. Okay. Start with the Crusades. What are the things you would talk about with the Crusades? At a minimum, you're going to talk about the collision between the Christian and the Muslim world, the discovery of new types of learning, encountering new goods, desirable goods, right? And the resurrection of previously forgotten learnings, right? That access to the ancient Roman and Greek learnings. Okay. What did the new learnings bring about? What? The Renaissance! See why I don't like it? Where my pen is. Okay. Now, what did the exposure to the new goods bring about? It brought about trade and also dissatisfaction with that trade, which brought about Age of Exploration. Okay. So, the Crusades impacted at least a couple of things, right? And we know the Renaissance started before the Age of Exploration. But you can't deny that the Crusades had a big part to do with the Age of Exploration. Why on earth would mankind suddenly want to travel to Asia if it had never seen what came from Asia and developed a desire for it, right? Okay, so the Renaissance is what? Yeah, a rebirth of an interest in learning and human potential. That's big stuff. Oh my gosh, look what I can do. Well, what arises out of that? Questions. The more I know, the more I wonder about. And then there's an invention. The printing press, and a man who had questions had access to the printing press. And so we have the Reformation. So can we definitely draw an arrow there? For sure. Now, the Reformation very much gave us permission to ask questions, right? To wonder, why are we doing it that way? Is there a different way to do it? Is there a better way to do it? Could this be organized differently? Right? Now, the Reformation definitively led to something immediately, or relatively immediately, within the Catholic Church, which is you guys have not been studying for your finals. Counter-Reformation, right? Or the Catholic Reformation. So you should probably include that in your essay. Okay. So we're questioning. We get the Catholic Church to even re-examine themselves. What arises out of all of this questioning and questing for even more new ways of understanding? The scientific revolution. Okay. So we know that is a causational thing there. Now, let's talk again about the Age of Exploration. What were some of the things that were immediately necessary for mankind to begin exploring the Earth's oceans? What kind of ships? Caravels. And navigators, magnetic compasses, and all kinds of what? New inventions and technologies that came about as a result of the scientific revolution. Yes. Things can be caused by and impacted by multiple things. Well, you as human beings are raised by your parents, but are they solely responsible for who you are, the person you are? Who else is?
Your peers.
Your peers, your minister, your teachers, right? Your grandparents, aunts and uncles and cousins, right? These are just grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins and teachers that influence these things too. You just have to recognize the sources of influence. Okay? All right. So where do we go from here? We're exploring the world. What do we do with the new lands we find?
We conquer.
We conquer them, and then we colonize, right? So I'm a monarch sitting in Europe. I've got all kinds of people questioning religion, questioning common beliefs about the way the earth is and operates, questioning how my body operates. I've got a colony or a bunch of colonies overseas to control. What do I have to do to keep a lid on all of this questioning and all this territory? I have to take control, which we call? That's right. I've got to get absolutist. Now, I'll use a different set of arrows for you here, different color. Right? Because absolutism is a reaction to the questioning of the Renaissance and the Scientific Revolution, and an effort to control the territories acquired through exploration. Can you handle this so far? Try not to let your brain ooze out of your ears, Tram. It'll get on the carpet and stain it. Are you good with this so far, folks? Okay. Are any of you finding this interesting, that it all links together? It's hard to see all of these connections when we're studying these concepts one thing at a time, which is why we put this all together in this one big final for you, so that you can see how interconnected it all is. Okay. So, now we're absolutist. We've got to control these questioners, these annoying people wanting to know why. Why do you do it that way? Why is it made that way? Why does my heart beat? Why is the sky blue? Now what? I have put my foot down as an absolutist and said, because that's the way I want it. Or, as the church, I have put my foot down and said, because that's the way God wants it. Remember Galileo? House arrest for the rest of his life because he suggested that Copernicus was correct and that the earth did revolve around the sun. Do you know when the church apologized for that?
Never.
After 2000. Yeah. So absolutism. So what's the reaction to absolutism? Rebellion in what form?
Like going against
You
the
go
church.
too far.
Go against the church.
Well, we've already done the Reformation.
The Enlightenment.
The Enlightenment. Before I rebel physically, I have to begin to think about rebelling. So absolutism definitely leads us to enlightenment. This is where all of that questioning, what do you mean? The questioning still relates? This is where all of that questioning still fits in. Because we're questioning absolutism. And that questioning was made okay by the Reformation and reinforced by the scientific revolution. So questioning one more thing is certainly aided by our kind of societal permission to question other things before. So now we're questioning absolute rulers. And what kinds of questions are we asking during the Enlightenment? Should we obey them unquestioningly? Should we possess certain rights like free speech, freedom of religion, the opportunity to be educated? Should we have certain natural rights as human beings? Should we be allowed to overthrow a government which does not serve us? Should we voluntarily give up some of our rights to government in exchange for its protection? That's called the social contract. Okay? More questioning. All of this questioning leads to? In this class, yes, the French Revolution. But you have to understand as citizens of the world that something else happened in between. What happened between the Enlightenment and the French Revolution? The American Revolution, yes! All right. Now this won't be something that you will write a full paragraph about, okay, because it's something we didn't study individually in here. But you have to acknowledge that the American Revolution occurs in here. Because it's a huge part of what you correctly said comes next. Which is the French Revolution. Okay. And to refresh your memory, we earlier said that Louis XVI agreed to support the Americans in the American Revolution because he didn't believe in absolute monarchy? No, that's not why. Well, because he didn't believe in colonization? No, that's not why. Why would Louis XVI support the American colonists? That's right, because he hated England, and anything that would hurt England made him happy, and that is the principle of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so what does Louis XVI, the absolute monarch of France, do in order to help the Americans? He sends troops and ships and incredible amounts of money. All right. And so the American Revolution is a huge success, and a new government is founded based upon the principles set forth in the Enlightenment. Right? Remember that worksheet? Separation of powers, checks and balances, totally Enlightenment ideas. Okay? So, American Revolution happens. How does that help get us to the French Revolution? What was one of the big causes of the French Revolution? What? Rights?
No, riots.
Riots. Why were people rioting?
They're broke.
Because people were broke, because they were paying high taxes. Why did the taxes have to be so high? Because the French had helped to fund the American Revolution, to throw off the bonds of tyranny. The irony is practically dripping off of the smartboard right now, isn't it? So, Louis effectively shoots himself in the foot. Effectively shoots himself in the foot by helping the Americans to overthrow their monarchy. And then in an effort to stabilize and restore his, he becomes even more absolutist and refuses to call upon the Estates General, which could help to solve the financial problems. He refuses to tax the nobility because he says, whose responsibility is it? It's his, because he is an absolute monarch. And so, his assistants based upon Enlightenment ideals. It's like he didn't read any of those philosophers, but he had. Okay? So the French Revolution occurs. Now, in the realm of irony, we have to take a little aside from the French Revolution here. Because it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Okay, should we go ahead and put up the last thing? Okay, we got to throw up Napoleon, right? Okay. Napoleon definitively result of the French Revolution. But here's where it gets cute. Within the French Revolution, okay, where do we start? We start at the ancien regime, right? The ancient regime. Wow. Okay. Where do we go from there? Well, the Estates General are part of the ancien regime. So then we go to the National Assembly. Okay, and from there we go to the National Constituent Assembly, which is still the same thing as the National Assembly, it just changes its name. And then we go to the Legislative Assembly. And then we go to what? The National Convention. And then we go to the Directory, which is an oligarchy. And the Directory then turns into the Consulate, which is a triumvirate, right? The Directory is like 9 guys in charge. They pare themselves down to the Consulate, which is 3 guys in charge, which is called a triumvirate. And then one of those consuls seizes control and becomes Napoleon, who is then an emperor. Whoops, an emperor.
Oh. Can I steal that for a minute?
Okay. So now, look at the huge irony. Where do we start right here? What is it? Absolutism. An absolute monarch. We go through the Enlightenment and explore liberty and freedom. We fight a revolution. That revolution takes a really twisting course through increasingly liberal forms of government to the National Convention, which is a republic. And then we begin going which way? Back the way we came, to leadership by a smaller number of individuals and a still smaller number of individuals until we end up right back at an absolute monarch. Now you cannot say that the Enlightenment didn't affect Napoleon because he gives us public schools and more rights for women and newspapers and a whole new legal code. These are Enlightenment kinds of concepts. But who runs the country with absolute power? Napoleon does, for sure. So, should we put one more arrow up here?
Yeah.
From where to where?
Enlightenment.
And?
Absolute.
Yep. You gotta think about that and that. Beautiful, isn't it? It seems very confusing when you look at it in its completed form, but did it make sense as we were going through? Okay. So you have to take this and turn it into an essay with supporting details. Again, how many details in each paragraph? At least 3. 4 would be good in some of these, I'm sure. This is a minimum of 9 paragraphs, yeah.
So can we like,
You should lay out an introduction for this one because part of this is writing the essay. And so in your introduction, you're basically going to explain the flow chart. You're going to explain the order of things that you're going to talk about. Can you have what? You can't bring anything in with you.
you could write it ahead of time.
Yeah, you can practice writing this thing. Absolutely. I would expect that you'll take 15 to 25 minutes to do your bullet pointing and basically draw out your flow chart for yourself and spend an hour writing. And you can write a very solid essay in an hour. When you get to college, guys, in about a 50-minute period, you'll take your exams. And when you take your exams in history classes, there'll be what's called a blue book exam. And you'll walk in and you'll answer a series of essay questions in 50 minutes. And they'll be fully developed essays. Intro, body, conclusion, supporting facts, all out of your head. And in general, you won't know what the questions are going to be. Now, I'm not saying this is college, which is why we've gone over organizing your thoughts. It's why you've got these posters, and it's why you know the question. But you've got to start developing the confidence and the writing speed to do this. So practicing would not be a bad idea. Here's the real beauty of this. In preparation for this, you're going to study all of this stuff that's on the posters, which is the stuff that's going to be on the matching multiple choice test. So it's not like you're studying for different finals. It's all the same stuff. Do well on one, you should do well on the other. Questions?
How's
Okay.
good well for you? Like,
How
you're
what?
saying- You're saying how, like, if you do well on one, you'll do well on the other. Well would be,
Well is relative to each one of you.
okay.
Some people are sitting out there hoping for a C, and others are going to be really disappointed if they don't get an A. It's relative for each one of you. And I have my relative marks for each one of you as well. Any other questions? Okay. There's my mouse.
All of our finals are summative, right?
Yes.